You giving me insight into this makes me double think about it. But when I crossed the line before, it kind of, there's an otherism that I notice here, and that's why people don't want to engage. I mean, no one really wants to be blamed.
If we lived in a world where everyone was taught that all animals' lives had value, don't you think that we would treat each other better? What's up, everybody? Natalie here with Allied Scholars for Animal Protection, and I'm sitting with Celeste. She very kindly sat down to have a chat about animal rights and veganism, and I think she wanted to touch on nutrition and things like that. So yeah, I'm curious, what are your thoughts on our signs and our setup and everything like that?
I definitely understand it. I know there's a lot of backlash towards vegans and just the vegan lifestyle. People, obviously, they know that sometimes is better for them, but the stigma behind it, and then also just kind of not caring enough.
Yeah.
I personally don't go vegan. Just, I guess I don't know enough about it. And I also, as well as other people, I don't really care enough to invest in that.
Yeah. You mean you don't care enough about animals, or care enough to learn about it?
Right now, yeah, it's just not one of my priorities to learn about it. And I guess maybe not that I don't care about animals, but it's not something that I've been taught. And I think that's part of the ignorance is what is the issue here.
Yeah. Sure. So yeah, none of us were taught from a young age, oh, animals should have rights, right? It's kind of something we came to afterward. But have you ever had a personal relationship with an animal?
Yeah. So my family actually has a ranch, and we have a few cows. Okay. We have some of them that we don't kind of sell to get slaughtered, and some that we do, obviously. And so the ones that we don't, we have a connection with them. We're oh, his name is Mr. Coffee and Cappuccino. And I've kind of asked my stepdad, hey, would we ever? And he's no, those are family. And then I'm but the other ones are the exact same. So it's, I can see the stereotypes or whatever. I can see that in my own family.
It's a bit hypocritical, right? To have some cows that you're happy to kill and some that you're not.
Happy, but that we just don't necessarily put as much effort into, or yeah, for sure.
So I kind of want to talk about animal abuse in general. Over 99% of animal products sold in the U.S. come from animals who live on these factory farms or these big industrial farms. Do you think there's any element of animal abuse on those farms?
I think that's without a doubt.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. How bad would you say it is on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the worst?
What's the definition of bad?
Just how bad is the abuse?
10 being they're purposely tortured and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I think purposefully, I would say I don't think it's purposeful, but I think they put no regard to making it humane. I would say it's probably a 9 or 10 on most spots.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's very, very bad, in terms of, maybe intentional torture just for the sake of humans getting pleasure. That does happen sometimes too, because the people who work there, it's a hard job, and they have to kind of try to control these animals. When the animals don't behave in a way they want, they take out their aggression on them. I've read accounts of slaughterhouse workers sticking out cigarettes on animals and things like that. Yeah, but then even things that are standard practice, not done for torture, are bad. Pigs, for example, are castrated without anesthetics. Their teeth are cut out. Their tails are cut off. Why do you think that happens?
Profit.
Yeah.
Just not caring.
Yeah, so basically pigs are so intelligent. They're as intelligent as 3-year-old human children. Yeah, so they go crazy when they're kept in these bad conditions. And if they don't have their tails and teeth cut off, they'll cannibalize each other. They're also killed in CO2 gas chambers, which are incredibly painful to them. So they writhe around for 1.5 to 2 minutes. It's really just bad. So any animal that goes through this system are going to have suffered incredibly. And if you go to the grocery store, you see local, humane, organic. It's no secret that the meat industry basically sets the criteria for what they can advertise with. So that doesn't really mean anything in terms of how the animal's treated.
I've been trying to, for the nutrition aspect of it, to get more grass finished meat. And a lot of times it'll say grass fed, and that's probably at one point in their life they were on a pasture, and then they were put into these big industrial complexes. So I know in terms of what I put into my body, I look at that, but I had never even necessarily thought about the humane aspect of it. I think we had a lecture on that once in middle school, and it's just one of those things that it's such a big issue that it's one of those things you just kind of go blind to.
It is. It's a big issue. It's kind of ingrained. It almost feels like we can't do much to change it, but we'll talk about that in a bit. I want to kind of touch on this idea of humane killing. Do you think you can humanely kill an animal who doesn't want to die?
You could ask that about a human. Could you humanely kill a human? A shot in the head, I guess. I think if it's within a second and there's no pain, so humane meaning it doesn't go through physical pain. Is that what you mean?
So if we look to the dictionary for the definition of humane, it means compassionate or benevolent.
For a good purpose or whatever?
Yeah, just something done out of compassion. So then you have to ask, can you compassionately kill someone who doesn't want to or need to die.
Right. If it's not wanting to, like, you could only basically say that about, dogs, like when they get really old.
Yeah, definitely.
No cow is like, oh, I have cancer, or like I'm on my last limb. Like, all of this is for the benefit of humans.
Yes.
I think the reason that like a lot of cannibals or like people who eat meat are think that it's not a bad thing is because we evolved. Not everyone, but a lot of us did evolve, kind of like hunting and gathering.
Yeah.
But we also had to be at the forefront of that and of the killing, and we don't have to be at the forefront of that today. So I think that's probably why it's such a big issue. It's just like I said, out of sight, out of mind.
There's a huge level of disconnection between like the killing of the animal and buying it on the in the grocery store. But so eating animals is definitely natural. You know, it's something that we've pretty much always done. We definitely had to do it to evolve to where we are now. But do you think that justifies continuing to kill animals at a time when we no longer need to?
What do you mean by we no longer need to? Like, we can sustain ourselves off of vegetables and stuff like that?
Yeah. Or, not even vegetables, like tofu, tempeh, plant-based meats, all sorts of other alternatives that exist.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I don't know if you've heard about FODMAPs, but it's like all these things that our bodies are very sensitive to. I know meats and like certain meats are like lower on that, and then vegetables are higher on that, and not everyone can afford testing to see kind of like where their body lies. I would say like we don't need to be eating in excess. Like 75% of Americans are overweight or obese.
Yeah.
So that obviously contributes to it, and the meat that's being manufactured isn't necessarily like good for us anyways. Like, it's pumped up with hormones. It's essentially eating like someone who would have been a drug addict. To make that comparison, I don't think it's necessary. I think it's probably hard to attack an issue like this if we don't also attack like consumerism and capitalism, because that's where it stems from.
Yeah, a couple things. It definitely stems from consumerism. Capitalism, I think the argument there is weaker because we can look at non-capitalist countries. They exploit animals just as much as we do. And then the other thing, the point I like to make is that vegans, we work on like individual focus activism like this, but we're also, lobbying in the government. We're changing corporations, like a lot of systemic stuff as well. Yeah, but I kind of like to think about it in terms of like cigarette smoking, right? So like in the 1950s, everyone was smoking all the time. So if they had tried to like make laws to like limit cigarettes or ban them in certain places, people would have freaked out. But once they got more individuals on board and people learned about like the ways that the tobacco industry is like harming people, then society was able to shift, and now there's laws like banning it from campuses and whatnot.
I think the difference there is our need for self-preservation. So a lot of people are like, how is that affecting me? How is, humane torture affecting me? And if we could somehow kind of like play it off I don't think it's play it off. I think it does affect how we affect each other, like how we think about each other. Like, if we can think about killing these animals and not really like bat an eye to it, I can't imagine like how that affects how we interact just like with other humans. I feel like we have to get more science backed behind that before we can just kind of say like, hey, this is bad, and then expect people to act on it, because we're really lazy at our core.
Yeah, no, we're definitely lazy. I'm super lazy as well. And that's a really interesting point that you brought up, because like I feel like all discrimination is kind of interrelated, and it comes from the idea that like some lives are more valuable than others. But like if we, when we're kids, right, we're taught that some animals are okay to kill, some animals aren't. So it's almost like the first form of discrimination that we're taught. It's called speciesism. Yeah. So like if we lived in a world where everyone was taught that all animals' lives had value, don't you think that we would treat each other better?
Probably. I never even thought about the connection between that, but we all want to see all our animals.
Yeah.
And even though we're all like the human race, like we have different like subspecies between humans, and then we have different thoughts about which ones are more athletic or more intelligent or whatever the case is between genders too. So
yeah, I
think honestly, like, you giving me insight into this makes me think about it. But when I crossed this line before, there's an otherism that I notice here, and that's why people don't want to engage. No one really wants to be blamed, and I think it's hard to blame people when they're so ignorant on it.
And I'm not out here like blaming anyone, because I ate meat for like 30 years of my life, and it's because I hadn't really had someone have an honest conversation with me and like sit down about it and like listen to my objections, right? So I was like, oh, I like the taste, I like the convenience, but then you have to ask, like, is that more important than animals' lives? I also thought it was like really hard to be vegan, and I don't have much self-discipline, but it turns out it's really easy. Like every, dining hall on the UT Austin campus has vegan options for at least every meal, sometimes 2 or 3 really good options. So that's great. But I feel like you brought up something else that I wanted to touch on. It was about like humans being selfish and like self-preservation. So the reason I originally went vegan was due to like public health concerns. It was during COVID, and I learned about the connection between animal agriculture and pandemics. So it's like a huge problem. Like 75% of new diseases are zoonotic. So by exploiting so many animals, animal agriculture causes deforestation, which drives wild animals closer to human populations, thus spreading more disease. So it is like a huge threat to global and public health, in addition to being one of the leading causes of climate change. So like part of my veganism is inherently selfish because I want to continue living a life that I can enjoy. And I don't see that being possible if we continue expanding animal farming with the growing human population. It's just not feasible.
Makes a lot of sense. What would you say in terms of like the nutrition aspect that we were talking about initially?
Yeah.
How would you deal with people who are like FODMAP sensitive, or who necessarily like are thinking like, I don't have the money to even budget for like regular healthy food, I'm not going to go full vegan, stuff like that?
Yeah, so I guess I'll address the kind of cost thing and then go into the FODMAP thing. So in terms of cost, there are studies that show that vegan diets come in around 30% cheaper than omnivore diets, because the cheapest foods at the store are like naturally vegan, potatoes, beans, rice, veggies, pastas, peanut butter, that kind of stuff. So I think the cost thing is like, that's an argument for veganism. And then in terms of the FODMAP, there's like a low FODMAP vegan diet that a lot of people follow. So, a lot of vegans have IBS. This kind of came out like we had a huge discussion about IBS recently in the vegan community. And it turns out that like a lot of people who have those issues, when you like slowly increase your fiber intake, it's beneficial, but you can start out at like a low fiber.
Okay, so if they were to go into veganism, just kind of like off the rocks with fiber, that's when their like intestinal issues would have a problem with digestion.
Yeah, if they started out eating like way more fiber than they were used to, then that would not be good.
A lot of sense.
Yeah.
So as a trainer, like when I put my clients on any new like nutrition habit, we have to start them really, really slowly. And there's a lot of things that get in the way. Like it's not just about knowing. Even the implementation, when I explain every aspect of why we're doing something new, there's setbacks. And so I can't. Not that I don't think it's possible, it's just I think there needs to be a better way of implementing this, and like I guess having someone there, like maybe a behavioral analyst or coach, because I like to run on the side of like being like realistic and just like idealistic. I think it's definitely something that's important though.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess I should kind of distinguish the difference between veganism and like plant-based diets, because veganism it's not really a diet, it's more of like an ethical stance against animal abuse. So it includes things like not buying fur, leather, supporting zoos, or anything that like it has animal exploitation inherently. In terms of plant-based diets, it's good to have the more education, the better generally. There's a website called Challenge 22. Basically vegan or people who want to be vegan can sign up for it. And it's like a 3-week challenge. They also get a nutritionist and like a mentor essentially to help answer any questions. It's all totally free. Yeah. So do you think something like that would be good?
I think so. Like I said, a lot of it is education, and we're so like oversaturated with information that's not really relevant to us. It's just kind of like super easy to grab onto that it's hard to sit down and listen to stuff like this.
Yeah, totally. And the thing about the nutrition aspect is that the science is there in favor of vegan diets. They're shown that like vegans have lower rates of obesity, lower rates of certain forms of cancer. Heart disease is like the big one, the top killer in the US, as I'm sure you're aware. And that's been linked over and over to animal protein.
It makes a lot of sense. And everything that I've been learning, I'm doing a precision nutrition coaching certification. Eating mindfully is a lot easier when you have more volume of food. And obviously you can be vegan, you can eat like bread and dairy products, or not dairy, but you can have like bread and pasta like you were saying. But if you went more plant-based, I think it would help us just kind of connect more with it.
Yeah.
And then also just kind of the whole aspect of treating each other like we all have lives that matter.
Yeah.
Not something I ever thought of before. I feel like it just it's a matter of like having a conversation that's non-judgmental and trying to not place any blame.
Yeah, and that's, why I do what I do. So I'm curious, like, where does this leave you now? Like, we kind of talked about all this stuff. Like, what would stop you from saying, like, all right, I find that, that lives should all have value and I'm going to go vegan? Like, what would stop you from doing that?
My physical goals and, like, my fitness goals, I'd say.
Okay.
I try to lead an active as lifestyle as possible, and I put my health as a priority. Yeah. So if there was a reason, and I've been like anemic in and out and like hypoglycemic, so my body's pretty sensitive to like some starches, and I'm also gluten free. So there's just like a lot of things that would go and get in the way of that. But I would say like I wouldn't go all into it, but I would definitely look into Challenge 21 and then start to implement that. And then also if that worked for me and I noticed a big change, I would probably try to implement that with my clients as well. There's no reason why I wouldn't.
That'd be amazing. Yeah. So basically, if you found out it was in line with your fitness goals and things like that, then you would do it.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah. I'd love to give you more resources and like a documentary to watch and things like that. Did you have any other questions for me?
No, that's pretty much it. We covered a lot of things today.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, I really appreciate that. Thank you so much.
If you enjoyed this and want to help me do activism full-time while getting exclusive content, join my Patreon today. Special thanks to my morally superior patrons, Amy and Andy.